Welcome to the beautiful side of grief, your go-to podcast if you're wanting to hear from people who have moved through heart-wrenching loss or those who are at the coalface supporting this process. It's diverse, heartwarming, though most of all it's positive and filled with go-tos that you can use yourself. I'm your host, Helen Morris, and I'm a health professional turned energy healing practitioner after I lost my only child and daughter, Tara, in a car accident in 2017. Energy healing has helped me turn my own heartbreaking loss into a positive, and I want to use my own unique experience to help you navigate your own journey with loss. You will hear from grief coaches, mediums, authors, first-hand loss accounts, plus many more. I'll pop the links to any free resources in the episode notes, along with my website address if you would like to know more about the energy work I do. Don't forget to subscribe or like so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now, sit back and relax as we navigate the beautiful sides of grief. In this episode, we're talking to Madison Eshelman, the founder of Grief and Groundwork, and she lives in Indiana. Madison is a grief, depression, anxiety, and trauma coach, and she supports individuals to achieve self-understanding, empowerment, healing, and self-love from the belief that under depression and anxiety is our unprocessed grief. Now, Madison does this by offering tools of how to grieve well by working with the nervous system and neuroplasticity. And she'll explain what that is all about as we chat. Most importantly, Madison does this work because of her own experience with grief and loss and is now dedicated to helping others survive grief in whatever form that takes. It doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one. Grief can also affect our core when we lose a job or a relationship or something else that rocks our identity of who we believe we are. So any major loss, really. So thanks for tuning in today. We are grateful for your support, and I hope that what Madison is about to share will be of great help to you in your own journey. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Madison and her wonderful insights. In this episode, we're discussing suicide. If this brings up anything for you, please reach out for support. Contact or Google your local or national suicide helplines or crisis prevention support. Or contact someone you know and trust. Don't just sit there with these thoughts alone. There are more people willing to help than you realize. So please reach out. Hey, Madison, great to have you joining me today and all the way from Indiana across the other side of the world. It's your evening, my morning the next day. And I'm really excited to have this chat with you about neuroplasticity and all the ins and outs of that. So let's start with you sharing your own grief journey and how that led you to the path that you're on now. As I understand, your own experiences were the reason you set up your website and your work that you do under Grief and Groundwork.
Yes, you're definitely right. So prior to my grief journey, I have a degree in psychology and was working in social work, really still passionate about doing like mental health work. But then in November of 2019, I lost my ex-husband to suicide. And yeah, it was really tough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, miserable to say the least. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if I can go through this, anyone can go through this. I literally study mental health for a living, and I was severely depressed, severely anxious in my grief, and did not know what to do. And then none of the textbooks I read, nothing prepared me for this. Nothing anyone could say could make it better, right? So it just kind of led me on, okay, I'm just going to I've always been in therapy, but just continuing down that journey. I was very lucky to have a mentor doing some really amazing work with emotional focused therapy. And that's where a lot of my passion has come to be, because that's what has helped me. So in my own process, and what my mentor helped me with was helping me feel it.
Yeah.
When we're grieving, all we want to do is, that depression is enticing. It's miserable and we hate it, but we don't even realize how enticing it is compared to doing the work.
Did you have any idea that your ex was even going down that pathway of even thinking about that? Because being your ex, you kind of think that you'd be maybe able to handle it a bit more, that it wouldn't throw you into such the depths of depression and despair that it did.
Oh no, we were very close, and we ended, every divorce is messy in some sense, but we didn't hate each other. I mean, he was a great man, a wonderful man, and it was just circumstances. I mean, that could be a whole other podcast episode, but it's just circumstances that led us to where we were. And I knew he was struggling with depression after the divorce, but we were, as close as you can be, divorced, living in separate states and processing through it all. So, but no, I mean, no, completely depressed, anxious mess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, here in New Zealand, we typically don't go into therapy. We're dreadful at that. We only go into therapy as the ultimate last resort. That's not something that's common here. And so, a number of people I talk to who are from America in therapy and that. So, I mean, I guess that gives you a good foundation, but still not the tools that you needed to cope with what you were going through. So, yeah, I find that really interesting that you then needed to find a whole new way of digging your way out of this experience.
And I think I would say the therapy that I had been in up until that point wasn't necessarily what helped me, but emotional focused therapy, which is now what I'm absolutely crazy about, because it's that therapeutic technique specifically, which is the model of feeling everything, going through and actually feeling our feelings. And what was really, I became suicidal myself. My depression was so bad. I was in such a slump. I had so much guilt, so much shame. It was horrific.
So can I just interrupt? Was it you that pulled yourself out of that, or was it somebody else close to you saying, "Hey, Madison, you need to get some help around this"? So did you recognize how deep you were in that? Because sometimes you can't.
Yeah. And again, this all kind of comes back to me being extraordinarily lucky that I had the mentor throughout my life that I've had. And she is also a trained therapist. And so she was just kind of there, because I had known her before this loss. And so for that, I was very lucky, because trying to find a therapist and one that matches and one that has the modality that's helpful is just really hard. And after knowing Jill, my mentor, who was very picky, because her modality was what changed my life. And that's what I'm doing now with my clients. Going back to me being suicidal, this is where I learned. And so this is where it's very important, because I was just like, no, there's no way this could ever get better. And my mentor was like, okay, Madison, if you weren't suicidal, you weren't that. You put that on a chair over here and moved it to the side. What's underneath? What is that protecting you from? Yeah. Which is a really weird question. Yeah. But, and I was resistant and I fought back and I wanted to yell at her, right? Like, what do you mean? There's not protecting me from anything. But I'm feeling my anger. And she helped me understand that anger, like suicidality, is anger turned inward. Anger that needs somewhere to go, that has nowhere to go, turned inward. And she helped me through that process, which is messy, because it's one thing to identify that, and it's a whole nother thing to actually access that anger. And this is why I do so much work with neuroplasticity and how the brain works, because what I've learned is that grief is so much more than your present moment to learn how to grieve well. It goes all the way back to our childhoods, where we're raised, right? What's appropriate in your culture and your family of origin and all this stuff, because depending on what environment we're raised in, we have shame around feeling certain emotions. For some people, anger is the only emotion they feel comfortable with, and they don't feel comfortable with grief. And other people feel very comfortable with the sadness and feeling comfortable crying, but they don't feel comfortable with the anger because they've been taught that if you're angry, you're a bad person, or especially in like religious view, it could be that you're sinning or you're not right with God, or there's so many different views. There's so many different perspectives to look at anger at and see that's bad. And for me, I couldn't stomach being angry at him after death. I couldn't stomach it, but that's who I was angry at. I was angry that he left. I was angry that he left us all here to deal with this. But I couldn't stomach processing that without without Jill being like, come on, like you're angry, feel it. Where is it at in your body? Describe it to me. Like we had to get into the nitty gritty, the details for me to be able to access some of that anger.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing with my clients now. That's what fuels all of my work is my own journey.
I so love that you're talking about this and talking about it with such heart and humility and openness, because, it was the same for me. It took losing my beautiful, beautiful, darling daughter to have my eyes open to a new way of healing myself from all the trauma that I had experienced. And for me, it took a different form, in the form of energy healing, where the emotion code and the body code. And that's how I learned to recognize, because I tried so much beforehand, loads of different other modalities to try and make me feel worthwhile and whole. Because for me, it was a lot of anger, jealousy, resentment.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. I was a really nice person, but I lived with all of these emotions that I didn't know where they stemmed from. And, it took losing Tao, my daughter, to understand that and unwrap that. And then once I released them, it was like, for the first time in my life, having a sense of calm and peace and being in control. And I realized how at a hyper level I'd been operating in my whole entire life. So I'm excited to hear all about neuroplasticity. And I know that means rewiring the brain with different pathways, correct? But why don't you tell us more about how that works and what's involved?
Yes. So my favorite analogy of neuroplasticity and how it works is to imagine that you're at the edge of a jungle and there's all these trees and it's just overgrown jungle. Okay. No path. And when we are born, that's how we learn. We start creating these neural pathways, and how those neural pathways come to be. So let's just say you're raised in a home that says crying makes you weak. And this could be physically saying it or subconsciously. So whenever you cry, dad goes, stop acting like a girl, or stop, whatever, insert thing here. It could be any sort of thing that enters our subconscious, like, oh, crying equals bad. Crying equals lack of respect. Crying equals I'm a weak person. It could be any of these things. And they can be subtle things that parents are well intended and don't even realize that they're doing. So it's
like boys playing with dolls,
Yeah.
Oh, don't play with that. That's sissies, that's for girls,
Exactly. Yeah. And it could be all these number of things. And so if you can imagine this jungle front, and there's a big sign on one little section where a path will be that says crying is weak. And then there's another sign that says crying is strong or crying is brave. And when little 2-year-old you gets this reaction, it takes a machete to the crying is weak and starts clearing a path.
Yeah.
And then that gets reinforced over and over. And then it gets cleared even more. And meanwhile, this path is growing even thicker, growing even more. So it's harder for you to access that. So now you have the urge to cry and you immediately shove it down, or you feel shameful after you do it, or right. And this is with any emotion. I'm just using sadness as an example. And this is reinforced in school. It's reinforced in our societies.
Yeah.
And so if you imagine,
a lot of it's unconscious, right? We're not even aware that we're embedding all those belief systems.
Yeah. And I think and I want to say this one more time, even the most well-intended parent might accidentally, so that's not to say that, you're a horrible parent if this X, Y, Z, this is not to shame parents. This is just how life works. We're all human. And parents have upbringings as well that they're working and cultures they're working from. But if you imagine this jungle front as this is literally how our brain works and neuron fires, and it's looking for the path of least resistance. Quickness equals survival. And our brain is meant to keep us alive. And so our brain just goes to the path of least resistance. And in this case, it's crying is weak. That's going to lead to my best survival. That's going to lead to my caregiver respecting me or taking care of me in the ways that I need, or right. It's going to until it's just a habit that we don't even think twice. We don't even think. We grow up, and then those are the people that say like, "Oh, I just don't cry. I'm just not a crier," or "Oh, I don't get angry. I'm just not an angry person." And it's like, okay, well, I understand why you think that, because it's been years and years and years and years of clearing that path. And so that's a lot of the work that I do, because when people come to me grieving or severely depressed, maybe not from like a grief event, right? The loss. And we'll kind of talk through the change triangle is one of my favorite things. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Explain that.
So it's an upside down triangle. The top left-hand corner is our defenses. So anything we do to avoid our feelings. This could be binge watching TV, drinking, drugs, or it could be things that you don't even realize that seem small, like being super sarcastic all the time, or, making jokes at other people's expenses, or the all or nothing thinking, the really, woe is me, the world is bad, everything's bad. And that was me and still is sometimes. So it's just easier to be like, oh, the world just sucks than it is to feel our feelings. So that's defense. And then the top right-hand corner is our inhibitory emotions. And this is where the magic happened for me, because I didn't realize for most of my life that anxiety, shame, and guilt, which was all things that I was feeling after Jordan's death, they inhibit us from accessing our core emotions. And this is not a bad thing. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is simply just to notice that we learned that anxiety, shame, and guilt equals easier to survive, feels easier to survive than feeling our core emotions. This is because childhood, and this is because present pain, the pain of losing him was so incredibly miserable that I couldn't even fathom to go into those places. I thought I was grieving. And in a lot of ways that is grief, right? Like, there's not like a hierarchy of grief, but to grieve in a way that's actually leading to some healing, which is what I desperately needed, is to go to the bottom of the triangle where our core emotions live. So anger, sadness, excitement, joy, sexual excitement, fear, disgust, all live down there. And every single one of them is equally as important. And anyone, and this is, why it's so important when I work with my clients to go through these, like, you might think, I thought I was totally fine expressing my anger. I'm a pretty outspoken person. I was actually being pretty mean to my current significant other throughout this whole thing. I was like, no, I can access my anger almost too much. But I was not accessing it towards the person that I was needing to. I needed to express my anger towards Jordan. And I was taking it out on everyone around me until I did that. I was like,
And that's why grief looks so different for so many people, isn't it? Because it's their own unique set of experiences and beliefs and response to emotions that makes their own journey so unique to them.
Exactly.
And that's why you can't put everybody into the same box and expect them to be able to respond the same way, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that analogy too of the forest and cutting your pathway through, and meanwhile the other ones, getting stronger with the growth and that. So how do we go about diminishing this pathway that we've created so well and so strongly to creating a new pathway to, like a braver, stronger self? How do we do that? How do we go about that?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say anyone who's even considering doing this work, like, buckle up. It's not easy. Because even, I want to say this with like as much empathy and grace as possible, like having had a psychology degree, starting my counseling master's program, having mentors, having all these things, I still struggled to find somebody to help me with this, a therapist. I had my mentor, but there was like limitations to that, right? Like I needed to find like a therapist to work with me in addition to that. And I struggled. There's not a lot of people doing this work. It's new. It's this type of therapy. Obviously, you can find a therapist probably anywhere, but this type of therapy, emotional focused therapy, where you're going in and really focusing on these core emotions, is really hard to find. That's another reason I'm doing the work that I'm doing, because it's close to impossible for people to find this. So I'll start with that. But the work, if you can find somebody to do it, or you do it by yourself, the work that you need to do is going and healing your inner child.
Yeah. So can I just stop you a moment there? Because, what I want to also ask you, I heard a really good expression that says, when the pain is greater than your fear, that's often when you're ready to seek that help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. And unless you genuinely do not know where to find that help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I know that lots of people can say, no, I'm fine. I just need time. I just need to be able to, I just need people to leave me alone, for God's sakes. Just leave me alone and I can deal with it, and all those ways of covering up, what you need to deal with and that. And I've started doing inner child work with my own modality. And I absolutely agree with you. I think this is the core of who we are. So take it away and tell us all about that.
Yeah. So inner child work, there's so many different ways of doing this. My favorite way, and the way that I do with most of my clients, is doing a guided imagining, similar to meditation, where, we'll both close our eyes. I do all of my work remote, so it's just us closing our eyes on the screens. But then I'm walking through, first and foremost, getting your body in a place of the most relaxed that you can attain in that moment. So really drawing attention to your body, regulating your breath, trying to release any tension in your body. There's lots of different ways to do this. And then moving to a place really just where your imagination takes over. And a lot of times people even have shame around using their imagination. So then we need to go in and give permission around. Imagination is not an adolescent, childlike thing. It is something that we have shame around, and we should all have imagination through our lives. So something that I utilize is using a safe space. We create a safe space in our head that is...
What's that look like, a safe space in our head?
So I'll just tell you what I would say to them. I'd say, okay, so imagine that you suddenly appear in your favorite place in nature. This could be real, a place you've actually seen before, or imaginary, or a combination of the two. But notice what it smells like here. Notice what your feet feel like on the earth. Notice the colors, the plants. And then we build a structure. They could be a lawn cabin or a tree house or a tent. And we're just really designing this place to be a retreat for them in their mind, because we're going to access some really painful stuff. And they need a place to come back to and regulate, where they can feel safe. And when we're not working together, going and accessing that safe place when they need to regulate themselves. Another tool is to create a container. So create a container, a jar, a shoebox, a treasure chest, somewhere that when we're done accessing these childhood memories that can be painful for a lot of people, a place where you can store those until next time. So we're not walking through our lives, not only carrying our present grief, but then also unpacking our childhood. That can feel like a lot. And so then after we visit the child, we visit the safe space, then there's lots of different modalities. But for example, I might say, imagine a door appears in your safe place and leads you into a museum. And this is a museum of your life. And usually at this point, people want to climb up the triangle and they go to anxiety because they know where this is headed. Anxiety starts. So sometimes just getting into the museum, we stop and we regulate. We're not in any hurry here, right? Giving yourself compassion at how challenging this might be. Then we'll talk through, okay, what's the anxiety protecting you from? It feels really probably vulnerable to go back to this place. It's really scary. Maybe you're afraid, right? We'll process through that. And then when they're ready, we will so let's just say a client is really struggling. They are people pleasers and they don't feel comfortable expressing their anger. I might say, find where you learned. Find in this museum where you learned anger was unacceptable. So I want you to walk through the halls, find picture frames with paintings of your life, sculptures, and find the one that represents the earliest memory that you can find of anger is bad. So maybe they'll find a memory where dad yelled at the top of his lungs at mom and mom started crying. And we basically put our hands on this sculpture or this frame, and then we enter that memory. And again, just like we did in the safe place, what do you smell here? What do you see here? Tell me what the room looks like that you find yourself in. What time of day is it? What season is it? And this is really, really important for our brain because that's how subconscious works.
So you're creating a whole picture, like a real, what am I trying to say here? Like a real image of that experience that your subconscious can relate to. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what you're doing?
Yes, of course. And this is, sometimes, we've all had this where a smell just brings you back to childhood or something. So a lot of times when we can just access one of these senses, like, for example, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know why, but I smell spaghetti. I smell spaghetti being made in the other room. And we're like, okay, just trust it. Like, just trust that. And then sure enough, they go into the kitchen and dad's yelling at mom in the kitchen while she's making spaghetti. And that's how our subconscious works. We might remember something that seems super insignificant, but it leads us. If you picture the jungle, right? It's like there's these old pathways there that haven't been walked maybe since you were 4 years old, 5 years old. And maybe the smell of spaghetti that came to you leads you to the path of that memory and more completeness. Because sometimes we go into a memory that's very like scattered and they don't really know what the memory is, but they're like, I think something happened one day when I was 4. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's go find out. And yeah, so we use our senses.
Is it a self-protection mechanism? Because some people really are. They close down and shut off their memories so completely that when you take them back, they may experience incomplete memories more because they just have not gone there before, that they just don't even want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a trauma response. It's a survival response to shove these memories aside and put them deep, deep, deep tucked away. And yeah, that's why using our senses in all these places are really important to bring those back to our awareness. They help it come back to our awareness.
Do you have many people that are actually resistant to actually going on this guided visual with you because they have shut down so completely?
Yes, definitely. And for that, we go at whatever pace they need to go at. I've had tons of clients that wait sometimes 6-7 sessions before we even practice or try it. And that's okay. Because I think, especially if you're an early loss, like, we don't need to be doing that. We do not be doing that. And my early loss, dude, I did not need that. I needed just listen to me. And so sometimes we'll just, if that's where the person is, they just need someone to process their current grief with. Absolutely. But when they're ready to really dig deeper into feeling this, then we'll go there. But for me, I wasn't ready for that when Jordan died. I needed like months. I don't remember exactly how long it took me, but I needed lots of months just to be a mess and lay on my couch and not talk to people. Like, I needed that. And I think that's okay. I think it's definitely okay.
Yeah. And I went the opposite way. I went out helping everybody I possibly could. And I was really concerned about the friends being teenagers and how they would be reacting to this event and trying to make it okay for them and trying to make it okay for everyone. That was my response.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's be there for everyone except me.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say we're 4 years on now since I lost Tal. And I would say I've cried more in the past 6 months because I've opened my heart up. Really, truly opened my heart up. And so now I can actually really feel that. And I've cried more. And and people go, oh my God, you were doing so well. What's wrong with you? Well, actually, I feel happier in the place I'm in now. Feels more authentic, more true. So
yeah, I love that you said that, because grief really genuinely has no timeline. And if you, wherever you are at any given moment, is okay. And anyone that tells you otherwise is probably just uncomfortable with your grief, with their own grief, uncomfortable with their own grief, and therefore projecting, oh, your grief makes me uncomfortable.
let's talk about that for a moment, because, it feels like it's a natural human instinct to problem solve for people. So even if you have no experience with grief, or particularly grief on that level, you want to be able to make it okay for somebody or provide something. Yet really just saying, hey, look, I have no idea what you're even going through and I can't possibly imagine it, but let's just have a hug and I'm with you, is probably the best response or reaction you can have. Because I hear so often people that are going through grief saying, I just wish people would stop saying it's for, higher good and, and you just need to get on with it and work through it. All these other inappropriate responses that really trigger people, because if you haven't experienced, you can't understand, can you?
Yeah. And that's why I always say it has nothing to do with your grief and everything to do with their inability to feel their feelings. And this is why the work I'm doing is not just for grief. I mean, I would work with anyone under the sun that just wanted to practice feeling their feelings, right? And this is why I think therapy or coaching or any modality that's going to help you get access to your feelings, you need to be doing that before you have a big life altering event, because it makes you have an inability to your own self, right? You're putting more work on yourself when it's time to grieve, because you're going to have to go unlearn, heal your inner child while you're grieving, which is hard. And then you can't really genuinely love the people around you, because you don't even realize that you're projecting all of your own insecurities about your own emotional incapacities, right? It's not actually about you're crying makes me uncomfortable because I can't cry.
Yes. And that is what it's about a lot. There's a lot of people that don't understand that actually the current health problems or health issues they have are an accumulation of a whole lot of energy, because feelings and emotions equal energy. Everything is energy. And when you repress them and stuff them down inside of you, that's a whole heap of negative energy that you're stuffing inside of you that can cause disease. And I think also we need to sort of touch on, you need to be able to process those negative feelings as well as you process the happy feelings. It's not all about feeling happy and joy all the time, because you need that balance. So,
Yeah. So if you think back to the triangle and you think shame and guilt, usually a grieving person feels a lot of shame or guilt about feeling happy after loss. Like I know I did. For me, when I would find myself laughing with friends, I would immediately, my heart would fall into my stomach and I would want to throw up. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, Madison, what are you doing? You should not be laughing. You should not be shaming myself.
yes.
And just like any of the other emotions, shame and guilt is a defense mechanism for feeling how we're really feeling. And for me, it was painful to realize I was joyful.
Yeah.
All, no matter what, even joy can be painful to feel. And so shame was protecting me. It was trying to, at least, right? Making things worse, but it was saying, oh, happy and feeling joy right now is so painful for you that I'm going to cover this up with anxiety, shame, and guilt, when really how I was feeling was that, right?
Yeah.
I was acting joy in that moment.
And there's people out there that equate their deep despair as a way of indicating how much they lost, how much they love that person they lost.
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts around that as well?
Makes complete sense because in a lot of ways that was me, and such a miserable way to live.
Yeah.
And so, you can tell, again, that's why whenever that person is ready to not be miserable anymore. And I'm not miserable. Okay. Like I don't want to come here and be like, oh, I grieved and I'm superwoman. Like, no, I'm still grieving and I will be grieving probably till I go to the grave. And so this is not to sugarcoat grief and say like, oh, once you get through this process, you're going to be just great. Like it's an ongoing process. It's so hard. And whenever you feel like you want to try to face this a different way, it's going to be a little bit better for you. Yeah. The pain is still there, but it's manageable. It's less all consuming. Depression and anxiety and even suicidality is completely all consuming. It takes your entire life. It sucks the joy out of everything. It's exhausting, completely exhausting. And what this is offering is not to take your grief away, but to give you tools to make it more manageable so that you can learn to live your life with your grief.
Okay, so let's now talk about what grieving well looks like.
Yeah, grieving well is feeling your feelings when you're ready. So, and you won't always feel ready. So I want to just put a disclaimer there. You might not feel ready to feel your feelings. So
people might say, well, I am feeling my feeling and it feels like shit.
No, yeah, but this is where the triangle comes in. I want everyone who feels that way to look at the triangle, identify your defenses. What are your go-to things? Because that's the easiest thing, right? For me, I would just binge watch TV for hours and hours and hours and hours. And that was an indicator to me that, okay, I'm probably avoiding some feelings here. And just because you're having crying spells does not mean that you're feeling your feelings, because I was crying a lot.
Yeah.
And I was angry a lot, but I wasn't putting that sadness and anger directed where it needed to go. And this is why it's so important to get help with this. Because we have blind spots. All of us do. All of us have so many blind spots. And so, yeah, it's really saying, okay, who am I actually angry at? A lot of times this goes back to childhood wounds that weren't expressed. And a lot of times if you have a loss that's leading to your depression and grief, you might have some unprocessed anger or grief specifically directed towards them that you need help unpacking. That's why this is so hard to like talk about in just one little session, because it's so complex and confusing. I could see how it could be very confusing for somebody like you just said. What do you mean I am feeling my feelings? But really just getting help processing this on a deeper scale.
And that's what it's about. I think it's about the processing of it. It's actually sitting with that sadness or that anger or that heartache or that or crying and just saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself to feel that, really feel that. And I'm going to say to myself, that's okay. And then, and then I'm going to say, okay, that's enough. And move on from that now, And it's being able to do it in a healthy way, isn't it? So tell me because I've only that, that's just from my experience of what I do, that, can you share with us how that looks like for people, how they should just sit and process their emotions?
Yeah. So one exercise that I think is great is to set a timer, like a 20-minute timer, whatever your capacity is, because you need an endpoint to look forward to. That's kind of when our defenses come up if we feel like it's never going to end. But in the 20 minutes, you have something prepared and ready to go. Maybe a friend's going to be with you, maybe a movie, maybe a hot cup of tea, something that's going to help you kind of regulate. Identifying first, what is the emotion that is really hard for you to act? If it's anger, maybe try doing an imagining in your head where you imagine expressing your anger. Imagine taking a lamp and throwing it at the wall. Imagine taking a baseball bat and breaking a bunch of vases and feeling it in your body as you do it. Feeling and experiencing this as you can do it. If you have a space where you feel like you can just scream at the top of your lungs and rip up a bunch of paper, right? Like anything that you can do to process this. Another way would be to write a letter. So it could be you write a letter, and in this letter, no defenses are allowed to come up. You're not allowed to you focus on one emotion. So the title would be, I'm angry, or I'm devastated, or that deeper feeling. And then writing a letter that you never send, right? That you just rip up or burn or whatever you need to do. But, it could be like, for me, to Jordan, I'm so angry that you left. I'm so angry that you did this to me, right? Just really letting it out and letting my body experience it as I'm doing it. So feeling that energy flowing through my body, letting my fists ball up if they need to, letting myself pace back and forth if I need to, letting myself cry if I need to. And then when the timer goes off, going to my safe place, regulating my body, going on a walk, and then I'm done for the day.
So some people would say, yeah, but aren't you reinforcing that emotion by actually reliving it in so much depth?
I think that there is the intentionality of that, the intentionality of this 20 minutes that you're setting aside time for is to not have that happen. It's by not setting this 20-minute timer that you're actually reinforcing it, because then you're just living in that constantly. I know I was just angry at everyone around me constantly. I was taking it out on the wrong people. I'd have panic attacks. I couldn't even drive for a couple of months after he died because I would just get so overwhelmed if someone honked their horn at me, and I'd be like, what a horrible person. So I think it's the opposite. It's by leaning in. It's by leaning into these feelings that we allow them to move through us. Otherwise, they just stay in us boiling.
And it's putting boundaries around it. So what you've done is you've set the timer, which acts as serves as a boundary along with a safe place that you've created. So, you're not just going through the emotion without something at the end of it. You've actually prepared something that you're going to look forward to that's going to take you totally out of that feeling that you were just in. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what does it look like for people who are avoiding their emotions? How does that present?
Oh, man, this could be a novel, a whole entire book just around this. But I think it presents differently for everybody. But the really common ones, depression. If you're depressed, there's a 99.9% chance that you have some unprocessed grief in your life, maybe from childhood or maybe from present, something that you're not comfortable feeling. Same with anxiety. I think if you're chronically anxious, same thing. If you are super, super stressed all the time, super burnt out, fatigue, a lot of health concerns, insomnia, it's just all encompassing. Like, it is more normal in our society to have feelings you're avoiding than it is to be in a healthy relationship. So with your emotions, so this is why it's so challenging, is this is a new wave of thinking about our emotions. Even when I was in school, I graduated with my psych degree in only 2015. And even just that recently, I didn't learn about this. Yeah. Like this is new. This is a new way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
And so it's going to feel just really strange. And it's going to feel like, what do you mean? Everyone I know is anxious. Everyone I know is depressed. It's because everyone you know is avoiding their feelings, because we're not taught how to do it. And that's what I'm aiming to help change, and people doing the work that is normalizing this.
I just love these conversations with people like yourself, because, it's that awareness. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So when we start to hear it and we start to think to ourselves and we start to go, oh, that sounds a little bit like what I'm doing. Oh, could I be avoiding a few emotions and things like that? For me, it was a workaholic. I was a total and absolute perfectionist workaholic. So being a perfectionist gave me an out for everything, because nothing, and so I'm a recovering perfectionist. Yeah. And I had to recognize that being a workaholic and a perfectionist weren't serving me well at all. They were just, defense mechanisms, my go-tos to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you say, it can look like any number of different things for people.
Mhm.
So why do you think we are the generation that needs to normalize mental health and recognizing the absolute importance of facing and healing emotional wounds? I mean, for our older generation, they would perhaps be saying, well, you just need to suck it up and get on with it, girlfriend.
Yeah.
Stop having pity parties for yourself and overthinking stuff. You just need to pull yourself up and just get on with it.
Yeah. So something for me that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, rather than shaming that generation and saying, wow, I can't believe you raised us like this. It all comes down to evolution, and we're evolving. This is with everything, right? We are always evolving and growing and learning. Even through my life, I'm a completely different person than I was 10 years ago. And that's just a part of me evolving in my life and growing and learning. And so this is the generation that has the most tools, the most ability. We are, we have the tools and the resources in a way that we never have before. And this comes down to even research, right? Like even the research that we had in the last 50 years, we were just really, really learning about the mind body connection in this really new way. And the generation before us didn't have that. They didn't have the choice. they didn't have this stuff.
And I think we're the generation that's breaking, generational trauma that comes through. It's been proven now that that's coming through in our DNA. And so we're just perpetuating or have been perpetuating generation upon generation, fear, anxiety, depression, unworthiness, all those things that we don't even know where the heck they came from, but they out in ourselves. And so I think that we're at a point with these tools, as you say, to enable us to say, okay, that ends here. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to stop passing that forward. Yeah. So I want to talk now about a post that you shared by Dr. Nicole LaPero, who I absolutely adore. I love her work. She's also known as the holistic psychologist. Mm-hmm. And she stated that the true key to getting help has less to do with credentials and everything to do with the inner work a person does. So, that's a pretty powerful statement, because I know that there are a lot of people out there now who are not qualified in the sense of having gone like you to get a psychology degree, that they're out there, that they are helping others from their own personal experiences. Yeah. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that are afraid of seeing a coach, because I'm not a licensed therapist, right? I have a psychology degree. I'm not a licensed therapist. And, I've even got some flack from it. Like, who do you think you are? You're hurting people. You're doing all this. And it's like, I appreciated this post because there's the post started on her Instagram because people were sharing all of their basically nightmare horror stories with licensed therapists that have gone wrong. And that's what led her to say, it has so much less to do with your credentials and more to do with your training. And I think the only reason that I am good at what I do is because of my own mental health journey. It's not this, I could have read any psychology book, gotten 100 degrees, but I can relate to people and help them because I've done the dirty work myself of doing the stuff that I didn't want to do. I went through it kicking and screaming just like everyone else. It was not a pretty journey for me at all. I could talk about it now and it might sound pretty, but it was not pretty and I'm still going through it.
And I love that, because that's what connects you with people. And unless people connect with you, they don't have a sense of trust in you. And I feel that that's what we've been missing so much with therapists and counselors. It's that natural initial connection, because in order to start moving through some of these really, really difficult feelings and emotions and beliefs that we have, we need to be operating at a level of trust. And you can only do that when you actually realize this person knows what they're talking about. They get me. They understand. And that's because of your own lived-in experience. And I'm not to say that's discounting all the incredible, great therapists and counselors and other people doing this work out there, but there are an awful lot that cannot perhaps empathize the same way because they haven't had that lived experience. And that's what I've been guided to do. I would never, ever, if you put a gun to my head and said, Helen, you would be helping people through their grief, I would have said, What? I don't think so, girlfriend. That's just not me. That's never been my idea of my life purpose. So really the work you are doing is about people operating from lived experiences and using that firsthand knowledge to share with others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
And what else do we need to know about the work you're doing that we haven't perhaps touched on today?
We covered a lot. I feel like I'm surprised how much we could squeeze into this little episode.
I know, haven't we done great? Well, actually, we're heading up to the hour, so I probably should just wind it down. But, we're going to finish with your 3 takeaways. So now let me ask you, what's the best thing that's happened to you either today or in the past week?
Today or in the past week? I got a new client this week, and that's always feels like Christmas to me. It always feels like Christmas because it's like another person taking the lead of doing this work. And I'm being honest, like I'm not just saying that because it's my job. I genuinely get butterflies in my stomach and I get so excited to be working with someone new. So I think that's probably my highlight from the week.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I just got a message from a past client that I'd worked with who's just saying, oh, I miss you. And, thank you for all the wonderful stuff that, you've helped me work through and all of that. And that just fills my heart.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, great that you don't need me anymore, because for me, that's the best testimonial that you've reached a stage where you've got the tools to trust your inner instincts and what's inside of you. So that's great.
Yeah.
So when your day is not going well, when it turns to custard and you wake up and you just think, oh, this is not going to be a good one, what is your go-to to pivot from there?
Oh, it depends. Some days it's just giving myself rest and just letting myself have that day, just letting myself be grumpy and curl up in my blankets, because sometimes that's necessary. And other times it's working the change triangle. So I will literally say out loud to myself, okay, I'm depressed right now. I feel depressed. I feel groggy. What is this protecting me from? And I'll go kind of back like a map in my head. And I've gotten really good at this after a lot of practice. But, okay, I think I'm just feeling really afraid. I'm afraid for this. I'm angry at this. And I'll do the best I can to externally. I'm a very big external processor. So I'll just talk out loud to myself or whoever will listen. I've been working myself through it.
Yeah. So have you got like a visual of this triangle system that you could perhaps share with our listeners? Is that something that you'd be happy to do just to give people an idea? And
yes, actually. So I didn't make this triangle. An amazing woman named Hillary Jacobs Hendel created this triangle. She writes a book called It's Not Always Depression. So amazing. And if you just go into Google and type in the change triangle, there's probably tons of different variations of this, maybe done by her or other people who have, kept elaborating on this. But yes, so
what was your name again?
Hillary Jacobs Hendel.
Great. Yeah. I'll go and have a look at that, and I'll put a link to that because I just think it's such a great visual and such a great tool to have.
One more thing. A feeling wheel. So if you go on Google and type in feeling wheel, it's going to be a big circle that has the core emotions in the center. I kind of want to create my own feeling wheel because I don't love all the ones that are out there because I don't think they're all encompassing enough, but it's a good place to start where the center has the core emotions and it kind of works its way out. So for example, the outer ring might say, I'm annoyed. And it's like, okay, move that in. And it actually leads to anger. It's like annoyed may be an easier way of saying I'm actually really angry. So that's another tool that I use when I can't identify how I'm feeling.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll pull up a feeling wheel and say, okay, which one do I identify with? And then I'll kind of work my way into the triangle, into the circle to see what core emotion might be being avoided.
Fantastic. Yeah, I will just go and hop on my best friend Google and pop some links in the episode notes for everyone. Hey, we've just had a wonderful, wonderful chat. It's just been such a pleasure, working through this and understanding this. And it's such important work that you're doing, Madison. So I thank you for that. Let's just finish up with your 3 takeaways for listeners.
Yes. So one would be that we can begin to heal only when we begin to, So Yes, really leaning into the discomfort and the pain and the things that you don't want to do. The second would be your ability to grieve well runs much deeper than your current situation. It's so much more than just your current loss, the current death you might be grieving, the current change you might be grieving. It runs all the way to childhood. Your ability to grieve well goes way back. And the third is that healing is possible and depression and anxiety are not your destiny. And that's what I thought mine was. I'm like, oh, well, I guess this is just my life now. I'll be depressed and anxious till the end of time. But if I can be here, anyone can. So,
and, looking down on you, how proud he must be feeling that, this whole journey for you has led you to this place where you have the amazing ability to now help transform other people's lives when they're in that space and they're experiencing those things. And gosh, I can feel you so much, Madison, and the beautiful work you're doing. And I know that this is just going to be of huge benefit to our listeners listening to this episode. And truly, anybody who is listening, share it far and wide, because you never know who needs to hear this and do this work. Like Madison mentioned, it's in its early days, really. This is a different type of, away from the traditional counseling and therapy that we've been used to. This is a new way of looking at our lives and how we can live to the best of ourselves. And I think everybody deserves to be doing that, to be living their best version of themselves. So again, Madison, heartfelt thanks for your time and your energy and your beautiful insights today.
Well, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to share it with others. Hit the subscribe or like button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, let me know how I'm doing, especially if there's more you'd like to know that perhaps we didn't get time to touch on today or in past episodes. And if you're after resources to help you out on this journey, or more about the energy healing work I do, hit the Healing to Be You link. That's the word healing, number 2, letter B, letter U.com. So until next time, be kind to you, and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.